charge today, extraterritorial jurisdiction study issues related to the implementation of Senate Bill 2038 and House Bill 3053. 88th Legislature, and make recommendations to secure and enhance the protection of landowners' property rights. There is actual litigation in both charges at this point. You'll notice that we have not invited the litigants to come testify, okay? They can, however, make comments in public, the comment period, but I just wanted to make sure that I was not, I don't think the intention of the panel here today to get into those active cases because those are literally in courtrooms in Texas as we speak. But I will start out by just framing the first charge because this was a letter that I sent to the Attorney General, and basically the two questions I asked about the program called Uplift Harris was, do counties have the authority to enact a guaranteed income program, and would such a policy violate the gift prohibition in the Texas Constitution? This is online, this is my letter, and what I was concerned about was with that program specifically was that it was a lottery giveaway. It was 82,000 people applied, a lucky 1.9 thousand won. There were the zip codes assigned that you could win in, specifically in the city of limits of Houston. There were none in the county, in a non-incorporated area, for example, and there was a lottery of that. And that's what I was worried about from the standpoint of the gift prohibition in the clause to be 100% transparent. And we're going to hear today, we have such programs operating in cities in the state of Texas. In fact, we've actually asked them to come testify. So with that, we'll get started because obviously the general use of the ARPA funds was quite substantial. And to start off, we'll have Ted Holliday from Legislative Budget Board come on up, and we'll talk about that. Members, any comments you all would like to make before we get started? I want to thank you for coming from the Finance Committee and getting us started here in the committee here today. Senator West.
Do you have a copy of the letter? Is there a response from the Attorney General's office?
No, they actually filed suit and on Harris County. There was no response to that letter. And because that litigation is active, I didn't ask either party to come today, but that's that was my public document.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Any other questions? Thank you. All right. Give us an overview, Ted.
Okay, great. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members. My name is Ted Holliday. I'm the manager of the Federal Funds Analysis Team at the Legislative Budget Board, and I was asked to present some information about funds that were awarded to Texas by the federal government through the 6 COVID-19 supplemental appropriations bills. And this is what the presentation looks like that I'll be speaking to. And if you turn to page 2 of the presentation, you'll see a table that looks like this, and it's titled Federal COVID-19 Relief Funds by Recipient Type. And this table...
And by the way, for the audience, we're going to try to get this up on the screens here in a second. But Ted, go ahead, because we'll run through it once with them if we have to.
Sure thing. So there's a fair amount of information in this table, so I just wanted to take a second to walk you through it. So the first row, all those acronyms there, those are each of the 6 COVID-19 supplemental appropriations bills that were passed by Congress, and those dates listed there are the dates in which each bill was signed into law. If you go down a row, you see a row that's titled Local Governments. So those amounts there are the amount of funds that were awarded exclusively to local governments in Texas in each of these bills, and that includes funds that were awarded directly and exclusively to cities and counties. And then that percentage there in the same cell shows the share going exclusively to local governments in Texas for each of the 6 bills. So go down to the next row.
Well, let's go over the total numbers so because the audience can't follow this.
Okay.
Without,
yeah.
So go talk about the grand totals and the splits
I'd be
on,
happy to.
on the programs. Take a couple minutes so everybody knows.
Absolutely. So we'll just start with that first column there, CPR SAA. That's the first COVID relief bill that passed in March of 2020. The grand total, based on the data source that we used, the grand total from that bill of funds that went to Texas was $86.9 million. So the share that went exclusively to local governments in Texas was $8.7 million. Out of that, about 87 million. So that's 10% of the $87 million total. The next row down is the share that went exclusively to the state of Texas. And it also, the amount that went exclusively to the state of Texas for each of these 6 bills, and then the share of each bill that went exclusively to the state of Texas. So for that first column, CPR SAA, the first bill, $1.5 million from that $87 million total went exclusively to Texas, which was almost, not quite 2% of that total. So if you go down to the last column, or the last row there, other, that shows basically everything else. So if it wasn't distributed exclusively to local governments or exclusively to the state of Texas, it falls in that other category. And that category includes funds that went to individuals, so like the economic impact payments that individuals and families received, funds that were awarded to businesses through programs like the Paycheck Protection Program,
Right.
and to hospitals, just any other entities. And one thing I wanted to mention is that this category also includes funds where a program may have distributed funds, some to states, some to local governments, some to other entities. So if it wasn't exclusively to local governments or exclusively to the state of Texas, it falls in that last category, other. And in this example that we're talking about, this first column, 88% of the funds from the CPR SAA were awarded to other entities.
Other what?
So it includes individuals, businesses, hospitals, and
Is what, like other individual private entities or
Yeah.
non-governmental entities? Is
yeah,
that what-
here I actually have a list. So if you turn to the next page, the methodology, there's a pretty extensive discussion. I can just walk through that other category for you. So yeah, as I said, anything that was not distributed exclusively to local entities or exclusively to the state of Texas. So individuals, the pandemic unemployment compensation, which is like the enhanced unemployment program. Institutions of higher education are included in this category. Small businesses, including funds from the Paycheck Protection Program under the CARES Act. Healthcare providers, in some cases agricultural producers, airports, nonprofits. There's just kind of a range of entities there that are included.
So so run down the ARPA column just specifically,
Okay.
because that's in the chart. Start with local government, how much money, state of Texas, other, and then the grand total is 104, but go
I
ahead.
will, yes.
Okay.
I can, so ARPA, that last column there, before you get to the total. So approximately 12% of the total. So let me start the total here. So according to the data source that we use for this, Texas in total received $104 billion under ARPA. A little over half were in that other category, about 54%. Exclusively to local governments, $12.4 billion went exclusively to local governments. That's 12%. And to the state of Texas directly, it was about $36.2 billion, or about close to 35%.
Mr. Chair,
Center West, go.
were these direct appropriations from the federal government under these particular programs to the categories, those listed in the categories of others? Or did it come through the governor's office, trusted with the governor's office, and then flow that way? How did it flow?
So if the funds passed through the state of Texas and then went to local governments, then that would be captured in the state of
Texas.
Texas row.
But other would have gone directly to
Directly,
from
yeah,
the federal government down.
exactly.
All right, thank you.
So Ted, basically, we got $104 billion of ARPA money on this chart here. The only thing else is obviously CARES is bigger. It's over 200 billion. And there's, by comparison, smaller amounts in the other four funds. And state of Texas gets roughly 3 times as much as local. And then all the private entities, which the list is voluminous, okay, actually gets the over half of the ARPA money, which is 56 million. Right, and that's the bucket of money that is various assistance programs, but that includes like direct payments, like PPP and other things directly to companies, individuals, et cetera, in the state of Texas.
Correct.
So it's a substantial amount of money.
Yes, yeah, I think that's fair to say. And I just wanted to, just real quick before I wrap up, I just wanted to make a note about the data source that we used. So the data in this table came from an organization called Federal Funds Information for States, or FFIS, and they're an organization. I believe they're associated with the National Governors Association and NCSL. We rely on that organization for a lot of the information that we get related to federal funds, so they had a pretty comprehensive list of data available that allowed us to put this table together, but we weren't able to disaggregate to the level of specific cities or counties based on that data.
No, I suspect that we do not have the manpower to go through the federal check register at this point. But no, that's certainly a good data source, so thank you.
You're welcome. And then just last thing I wanted to mention that our office does conduct pretty extensive monitoring of COVID-19 relief funds. We really focus on that middle row there, funds that pass through the state of Texas. This is a requirement under Senate Bill 8 of the 87th Legislature, third called session, and these reports can be found on the LBB's website. And then finally, that last slide there just kind of will help you make sense of all those acronyms on the first table, the names of the different bills that passed at the federal level.
Okay, thanks, Ted. Questions, Senator Eckhart?
Thanks so much for being here, Mr. Holliday. Can you tell me how much of all of the COVID-related federal funds were distributed to the state rather than the direct allocation to the local governmental entities?
Yeah, I think to answer your question, I believe there's a figure on that table that would give us there. So if you look at the last column on the table, the total, like the far right total column, that shows the total that came to the state of Texas. So across all 6 bills, funds that went directly to the state of Texas, it would be $83.4 billion, or about 23% of the total that came to the state of Texas across all 6 bills.
So about 23% went to the state coffers for distribution rather than a direct allocation to local governments or other entities.
Yes.
And that total figure, the 22 más o menos percent, was how much?
$83.4 billion.
$83.4 billion for the state to distribute. What remains of that $83.4 billion that has not yet been distributed by the state, if any?
So I would have to look at the some of the reports that we get from state agencies to answer that question, which is a slightly different data source than we use for this table, because we weren't able to view local and other, but I believe we do have that information, the share of like the funds that were distributed to Texas and how much has been expended and how much remains. I just want to caveat that because it's a different data set, the numbers may not quite match up with the FFIS data in this table, but I can get you that. I don't have it unfortunately on me right now, but I can follow up with it if that's
I think
okay.
that would be valuable information for the committee to have, because I believe the purpose of the direct allocation during the pandemic, I was actually in local government at the time, was a belief at the federal level that through direct allocation to the localities, the money would get spent faster. And so I would be interested to find how much money was distributed to the state as opposed to direct allocation, and how much, if any, remains, has not yet been distributed. There was also timeframes with regard to the spend down of that money. Otherwise, there would be federal clawback. I would also be interested to know what kind of clawback has occurred in either local allocation or state allocation, and what type of displacement, budget displacement was allowed from the dollars. The reason why I ask this is I would like an answer about whether the surmise by the federal government that the money would go out faster and be used quicker through direct allocation.
Actually worked. No, I agree. Good question. You are going to, there's another, I think we're getting your.
That's urban counties.
Yeah, I know. Because we do have a summary from the urban counties that's a little more detailed by county on this coming later. And Ted, is that something you can do, or should we be asking the state auditor? Just so we know to, because I think it's a great question.
We don't really collect data at what happened with the funds at the local level. We just local entities don't report to our agencies. State agencies do on a quarterly basis report the awards that they received, their expenditures, how much was passed through maybe to local entities. So we do have a kind of a running total of like that share. So we do have that information that we could provide, probably not the other piece. But.
Okay, well then, please give us the piece you can do. That's good.
And I'll be happy to work with the chair to find that number, because I believe, I've been told, but I'd like this corroborated, that there is still about 8 billion with a B within state coffers that have not yet been distributed.
Well, that's a big enough pot of money to where we should be able to find it.
I can look into that.
Okay, so
8 billion?
with a B, that's what she said, as opposed to an M. Okay, so,
And that's state of Texas.
well, that's what she said, so we're gonna find out. In fact, you know what, why don't we go ahead and see if the auditor's office can catch up with us later in the hearing today.
I'm sorry, Mr. Shaw.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
The reason I said it, Senator Eckhart, the state of Texas received 83, is that billion or million?
That's billion
That'd be a billion.
on this one.
On page 2, it's 83 billion?
Yes.
Ross, did you get this up yet, or you? Okay, fine.
Wow.
Yeah, right. So if that would be the case, if that rumor is true, that's about 10% of that total.
Yeah, and is it being used to certify the budget?
Well,
And of course, there are strict allocation requirements by the federal government and timeframes.
You can't certify, I think it's 2026.
right. It has to be spent by then, right?
You can't use it to certify your budget.
There are some budget replacement options, but they're,
Sure, you can use it.
you can in some regard. So this is important to know. I think frankly, the bigger question here is not what the local governments are doing with their money that they spent down really pretty quick. The real question here that I would like this committee to delve into is what is the state doing with their money, and has it been allocated, and what for? That's our realm, and we should be looking at it.
Well, Sarah, we're going to answer that question, because $83 billion is a big number, okay? And maybe we'll get an answer by the end of the show today.
Maybe that guy just sit down.
Yeah, Mike Morrissey might know,
Morrissey probably has.
but we'll see him on the first break. Okay, that's right. Ted, what else you want to add to this?
That's all I have for today.
All right, so substantial list, there's really two questions in Senator Eckhart. Is the predisposition was that money actually got directly to counties? Was it spent faster, better, quicker? We'll find out, and also we'll find out the standpoint of what our expenditure of the ARPA funds are. All right.
It's not just counties, it's just local government, period.
Right, local government period, right, that was the charge.
As a matter of fact, and I'm sure we'll have somebody who can give expert testimony to this, the direct allocation was to counties, and then counties were required by the state to do sub-allocations to municipalities.
Well, there was also direct money sent to school districts, et cetera, right, so the list is quite voluminous, actually. All right, Ted, thank you. If you would hang for a bit in case we have a backup question or two,
thing.
I'd appreciate it. All right, next up, Bill Longley, the aforementioned cities, Texas Municipal League. Adam, you're on deck. And grab your auditor. Okay, so, Bill, state your name, who you represent.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name's Bill Longley. I am General Counsel with the Texas Municipal League. Really appreciate the opportunity to be here to talk about federal funding, directly distributed federal funding from a city perspective, probably with a focus on ARPA and the State and Local Fiscal Recovery Fund. There was roughly $65 billion made available to cities under ARPA nationwide. That's based on a formula that is based on population. Texas cities received $4.8 billion, and of that amount, $3.4 billion went directly to quote-unquote entitlement cities, which are over 50,000 population. There's 75 of those recipients of money directly from Treasury. Allocations ranged from $600 million, city of Houston, to down at $4.4 million to the city of Little Elm. In addition to that, nearly $1.4 billion went to non-entitlement cities, which are cities under 50,000 population, and that was allocated through the state, through the Texas Division of Emergency Management. There are 1,145 of those cities in Texas, and under Treasury's rules, no non-entitlement unit could receive an amount greater than 75% of its most recent budget. So even the formula that was allocated may not be the total amount that those smaller cities could draw down. All in all, there were 70 non-entitlement cities that either declined funding or just failed to apply for funding at all.
Now, were these, go ahead, Sid.
No, I was just.
I'm curious, were they general law cities or, okay?
Mostly. I mean, there are non-entitlement cities because it's under 50,000 population. I mean, you're really going down to 5 before you're getting to general law cities.
Right.
But most of the ones who did not either decline funding or didn't apply were not only general law cities, they're usually very small general law cities that maybe saw the burden of compliance with Treasury regulations as more than they wanted to take on.
And Bill, I don't know if this was your information, but the stats we have on ARPA funds to the 5 largest Texas cities are, let's see, the City of Houston, 607, City of San Antonio, 327, City of Dallas, 355, City of Austin, 188, City of Fort Worth, 174, roughly. I mean, these are pretty substantial, sums.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so go ahead.
Okay, just to talk briefly about authorized uses of those funds that cities that were passed down from Treasury to cities. One, I mean, some of these maybe go without saying, but responding to public health and negative impacts of the pandemic. That was one where cities could actually give assistance to households, small businesses, nonprofits if there was a COVID impact and that was identified and the program set up was reasonably proportional to that impact. Premium pay to essential workers, necessary investments in infrastructure, water, sewer, and broadband all included. And then the Treasury's final rule included providing government services to the extent of any revenue loss. And they actually had a standard allowance of $10 million for the amount of revenue loss that was promulgated and used by not just cities in Texas, but cities all across the country.
Right, that was really a cap, right?
That's right.
Right, because just the top 5 cities, just a ballpark, it's about 1.6 billion. Okay, so a 10 million cap would be only 50 million out of that. So that's a very small part of the distribution itself.
And at the same time, you had non-entitlement cities that maybe were allocated $25,000 that could use all of that under the 10 million, but obviously weren't approaching the 10 million figure. Want to talk just briefly on some of the legal analysis that would go into what a city thinks about when not just receives the funds, but is going to spend the funds, particularly on the direct assistance parts of the program. Obviously, cities would have to spend in accordance with federal guidelines, but they'd also need to consider state law guidelines, both in statute and the Texas Constitution. One common consideration for cities here that provided assistance to, say, a small business would be how to comply with Article 3, Section 52 of the Texas Constitution. Generally speaking, there is a test, a common law test. Ironically enough, in the case Texas Municipal League Intergovernmental Risk Pool versus the Texas Workers' Compensation Commission back from 2002, that says before making what could be considered a gift or a donation, a city council must determine, one, that the conveyance will serve a predominantly public purpose of the municipality, two, that the city would retain sufficient control to ensure that the public purpose is carried out, and three, that the city would receive some return benefit. So you're complying with the federal standards, but you're also looking at the common law to make sure that you're not running afoul of the constitutional prohibition.
Well, and this is one of the big questions today. That's actually, why I wanted everyone to testify, on this. Because when you're looking at running afoul of the constitutional prohibition of it, the gift clause is somewhat broad by what its nature, even though I think it's been, kind of narrowed down over time. Bill, are there any other programs, to your knowledge, in the cities? I know you've got some direct assistance programs, AKA, guaranteed income. Are there any of them that were lottery-based selections?
I wish I could give you an answer on that. I don't know the setup of those programs probably as well as I should for being here before you today, but
Because that was kind of an obvious question.
well, and I just don't know
That's right.
how those are structured. I know that cities have those, and I would just have to say that the likely consideration from a legal standpoint is this test. You have to make sure that it's a public purpose and make sure that there's adequate controls in place to carry that public purpose out. I would think that when any entity, a city in my case, would embark on a program like that, that would be the primary consideration.
If you knew of one, you would say yes.
Perhaps. I truly don't. I don't know of one. I guess I would say.
Perhaps, aren't you? Well, never mind. Okay. Okay, that's interesting. All right, now I'm going to make the assumption if you knew one, you would say.
That okay. Fair enough. Fair enough.
And when I ask people that question, because I know of no other lottery screened, program like this. Okay, so that with a direct assistance in a with ARPA funds, really effectively, and other funds as well, because that's really part of the questions that I'll ask today.
I have a question, sir.
Senator Eckhart.
Mr. Longley, is it common for municipalities to have assistance programs for food assistance?
I can tell you, we get questions all the time at the TML legal department about any kind of potential donation, gift, kind of a question. Is giving money to a little league or a nonprofit, is that permitted? So yes, I think that there are programs like that in place that cities have looked at, city councils have made decisions on under the advice of their city attorney to say, we think we can structure this in a way that benefits the public.
So there are food assistance programs to needy families in municipalities in Texas.
I wish I could give you a straight answer on that. I don't know for sure, but I know there are similar programs to
Okay,
that
Bill,
in
next time
cities
we're going
all
to submit our
across.
questions in advance.
Yeah. How about
That's
how about
right.
rent assistance to needy families in municipalities?
I believe so.
How about child care assistance to needy families in
Yes.
municipalities?
Yes.
So you, without saying specifically, there are programs inside municipalities that distribute direct funds to individuals for things like food, housing, and childcare.
Correct.
And there are, in these programs, often more applicants than there are more eligible applicants than there are supports to provide, correct?
I would think so.
And in those instances where there are more applicants, eligible applicants, than those who are, than there is funds to provide, it is usually on some kind of first come or some other system whereby some who are eligible will get and some who are not won't, because there just isn't enough to go around, correct?
You would think that that may be the only way to structure a program that obviously has limited funds.
And so in that regard, any program that is underfunded and oversubscribed would be a lottery. Thank you.
Yeah, I was going to say, that was a good one not to answer. Okay, that's right. Now,
Mr. Chairman.
oh, yeah,
I'll
go
take that
ahead.
as a compliment.
Well, no, that's right. Well, the obvious conclusion is not with that question. Go ahead, Senator West.
I'm going to say ditto on those questions. By the way. As it relates to, you cited Article 3, Section 52.
Yes, sir.
This has to be done for economic development purposes.
There is an exception that was added, I think, in the early 2000s for economic development purposes.
And so when a city decides to look at the different programs that were just articulated by my colleague over here, they must, at city council, whatever the case may be, there must be some memorialization of the public purpose
Right.
that they are attempting to help as a result of this.
Absolutely. You see that all the time in economic development agreements.
And so, do you know, this is a pretty broad question, do you know of any attacks on the public, once a political body makes a decision, do you know of any attacks on the public body's articulation of what the public purpose is? Or is that pretty much kind of just...
No, there have certainly been challenges over the years. There's a lot of very old case law and old attorney general's opinions on that exact question, and some of that case law indicates that there's generally a presumption that if the city's making those decisions on a policy basis, the court's not going to come in and overturn that unless
Right.
it's arbitrary and capricious, and it's clearly something that that doesn't fit a municipal public purpose. So I think courts have been reluctant to second guess those policy decisions.
Arbitrary and capricious.
Yes,
correct?
sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. And so that not only applies to cities, but applies to counties also, right?
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Governmental entities. Okay, thank you.
A couple things, if I could, Mr. Chairman, just on transparency. 'Cause I
Sure,
know
please.
That's part of this. There is, especially with ARPA, there's a number of different transparency and reporting provisions put into the law. It includes for metro cities an initial interim report that had to be filed back in 2021. All recipients have to do a project and expenditure report. That's quarterly for larger cities, and a recovery plan report for cities over 250,000. We additionally have, I would say, safeguards at the state level on this, both procurement laws. All of this has to go through a city's budget, so that would be posted online in a transparent way. And then you also have the Open Meetings Act, Public Information Act, that would apply to the expenditure of these funds. And certainly with a lot of the larger cities, but a number of cities have dedicated websites for how they're spending these kinds of direct allocations. I think it was mentioned earlier, I'd note that under this program, funds have to be obligated by December 31st of this year. Don't have to be finally spent until 2026,
Right.
but we should see those obligations in city budgets now. Treasury had some data on this from December of 2023, so a little less than a year ago, showing that obligated funds that number was hovering around 70% at the time. So I would think that remaining 30%, the gap's been closed.
Bill, what was the
hopefully
date of that 70% number? I'm just curious.
That was from Department of Treasury.
Yeah, but I mean, what was that through 2024? Pick a number. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah. My understanding is it was the latest reporting period they had, which was the end of 23. December
Okay, so
of
if
20.
we were at 70% at the end of 23, you'd likely be somewhere around 80% at the end of 24. I'm just, potentially maybe by the end of 25, you're at 90%. So I'm just trying to put into context the question that Senator Eckhart asked about, we've got about less than 10% of the, of the ARPA money left in the state. And that could be a common figure by just watching these trends, but we don't know right yet.
Well, and I would say that this data is specific to obligated, which is something that has to happen by the end of 24. It's not on spent. So I would hope that over the course of the last year, especially with that deadline looming, that entities said if we have 30% remaining, we got to start to obligate.
Either
that.
spend it or it's clawed back, right?
That's right. Yes,
Okay,
sir.
I mean, there's not any other options here.
Right.
And really, my last question for you, Bill, is that, okay, you represent people that have home rule capability. You can make ordinances, et cetera. But there's not an ordinance that you could make that would override the arbitrary and capricious standard, true?
Correct. I mean, that's all constitutional.
Right, and that's really my question, because I think a lottery is, quite frankly, arbitrary and capricious, depending on who wins.
And how are you defining lottery, sir?
Well, I think when the entity advertises it as a lottery, it is a lottery. So that's, I mean, that's what, and by the way, PR and transparency of this program is not the problem, okay? Because this was about the most public rollout as you can get. But when you have an entity that is, literally out there saying we're going to select by lottery based upon specific zip codes that are subset of the county, and then we're going to pick lucky 1.9 thousand winners out of 82,000. That's pretty close to capricious and arbitrary, but that was my original intent in writing the letter. But anyway, Bill, last comments, and we'll let you go unless there's other questions for you.
No, I think that when I think back on some of that case law, the arbitrary and capricious standard really has been applied to whether or not there's a public purpose.
Well, right.
It's generally linked to that, and perhaps it could be extended to apply to the way a program is set up. But most of the jurisprudence that exists is, could you make that determination to say this is a municipal
standard,
public purpose?
right, when that money was transferred, right.
Yes.
If lack of funding to cover all eligible recipients is the definition of arbitrary and capricious, we're in big trouble in the state of Texas.
Well, the good news is we're
That's kind of arbitrary on your part.
that is even capricious, maybe. Thanks, Bill, for your
Very
testimony.
insightful.
Thank you.
Right. Well, time will tell. All right. Thank you, Bill. Adam, come on up, and I think you have Adam, and then Julie, come on up. But we'll let Adam go first because we want auditors always to go behind Adam.
You're a wise man, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, Adam Haynes from the Conference of Urban Counties. Thanks for the invite. When I was setting it up, I asked your staff if, since I was reporting here for 34 counties, did I get 127 minutes? And they assured me no. So with that, let me jump right in. Both of y'all all of you have in your drop boxes 2 documents from us. One has a blue banner. It's for the CARES Act, and one has, because I know the chairman, has bar charts and pie charts, and then a lot of data behind. And so real quick, just let me hit on CARES. I'll answer a couple of questions. Senator Eckhart, the CARES Act, as you know, ends this December, and literally 98.999% of the money is obligated. We still have some money out. The state has obligated all of their funds, but
So we have that one answer.
that one,
Yeah.
I'm trying to answer questions, Mr.
Thank you.
Chairman. And the difference, to answer one of the other questions, the difference really between the CARES and ARPA was, CARES was in the height of the pandemic and the height of the economic downturn, so it largely went to people. I mean, we bought PPP, so did the state, and when I say we, counties. We bought protective gear, we did rental assistance, we did food assistance, we did housing assistance. It went to folks to try to keep the economy churning. CARES is largely gone. We have to have all the expenditures done by this December. And
Oh, this December.
yes, CARES.
Okay, sorry, okay, all right.
ARPA
Okay.
next. ARPA is obviously, and even though the charge is specifically related to ARPA, I wanted to make sure we have the context of CARES and now ARPA. ARPA, a little bit different program, as Senator Eckhart asked. CARES did go mostly to the governor's office and then distributed out to local entities. We did have direct assistance to folks over 500,000. So some counties, some cities got direct appropriations or direct federal assistance from the Treasury under CARES. ARPA, on the other hand, went directly to entities. And so counties it didn't come through the state got money as well under ARPA, but that money went to counties, it went to cities, it went directly to those entities.
You had more than one distribution channel set up simultaneously.
Yes, sir.
That's
And
good.
so as it comes to counties, and I think largely cities as well, the difference, the main difference between ARPA and CARES is that counties have spent ARPA dollars on stuff. And so you'll see, and you have a report from all 34 CUC members, their expenditures, and we have a little bit more time. We have to have it obligated by this December and then spent by December.
year.
Yes, sir, that spot on by December of 26, and go from there. But in our ARPA dollars, we've spent more. You've had hospitals, clinics built. You've had hospitals expanded. You've had jails expanded. We've built courthouses, and so we've built roads. And so ARPA went a lot toward projects that, and I'm never going to miss the opportunity to get a plug in. ARPA went to projects that save property taxpayers' dollars. We have used those federal funds to save property tax dollars. We bought sheriff's vehicles, we bought constable vehicles, and we have done that.
It's
Transparency-wise,
good to buy things that will last a while with federal money.
and that's what we have
That's
done.
right. If you have a choice between buying those things that last or things that disappear, I would much rather buy the things that are actual assets.
And largely, that's what we have done at the county level. Transparency-wise, all of the information I've provided you today is available at the Treasury. It's sourced on the document, the last page of the document. You can find these exact figures there. There was a figure earlier of 104 million. We've got a record of 149 million. So a little discrepancy. I'll ask LBB where they got their figure, but we have it as 149 million.
You mean on ARPA?
Billion, I'm sorry, yes, for ARPA, yes, sir.
Right, so
And, but,
it's an extra
again,
45 billion.
going with a plug here, most of our transparency issues are related to things that y'all have done as state legislature. We've got County Procurement Act, we've got sealed bidding, we've got competitive bidding, we've got the Open Meetings Act.
Yeah, generally bad things happen when the competitive bidding
Any
statute gets exempted, but I digress. Go ahead.
any expenditure of ARPA dollars has generally had 3 hearings at the county government. We have to post a hearing and have a hearing when we receive the money. We have to post a hearing and have a hearing when we obligate the money, and we have to post a hearing and have a hearing when we expend the dollars.
Right.
So with that, I'll answer any questions.
Adam, just to start with, are there any other counties in the state, to your knowledge, or at least in your membership, that are using ARPA money for some type of guaranteed income program?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay. Anything else in that area you can add? Is there programs, anything that relates to some type of lottery process for selection of funds in the counties?
Not
Besides the
a
Harris Uplift program?
not a direct lottery, but Senator, on that specific program, 2 things.
If you're
One-
gonna use Senator Eckhart's
I'm not gonna use-
methodology, I'm aware of it.
I'll let, I'm not real smart, but I'll let Senator Eckhart. I'm smarter than that, Mr. Chairman. 2 things. One, based on public input, some of that very pointed from very high-level folks. The Harris County has reissued some of the criteria on the Uplift program and have tried to address some of those concerns and then just re-voted to send it out. That's that second version, 2.0, is what's currently under litigation. And then 2, the reason you won't find it on any of our reports is no money, no dime, 0 taxpayer dollars have been spent on that program.
Right, to this point.
Yes, sir.
No, thank you. I appreciate that. Okay, other questions for Adam? Julie, state your name, who you represent.
Yes, sir. Good morning. Julie Kiley. I am the Williamson County Auditor and currently the Secretary for the Texas Association of County Auditors. Pleased to be here, Mr. Chairman and committee members. I wanted to bring to you what Williamson County has done with their CARES and their ARPA funds. We were a direct recipient of both programs. We received approximately $93.4 million in CARES funding and $114.7 million in ARPA funding. Our CARES funding was largely spent on PPE, first response, as that was the height of the pandemic, if you will. But over 50% of it, not quite 50% of it, was spent on small business assistance. And the way that we managed that program was first come, first serve. We knew we might not have enough. Our blessing ended up being that we actually did not have as much need as what we budgeted. So we then turned that into a rental assistance program, a utility assistance program, and it turned out that we ended up not having as much need as what we had budgeted for that program either. We returned approximately about $3 million of our CARES funding, but that also included a small amount of interest that those funds earned while they were in our coffers. We received, as I mentioned, $114.7 million for ARPA. We've currently got all but about $800,000 of that committed as of today. We will actually be placing an item on our Commissioners Court agenda in the next couple of weeks to discuss the balance of those funds. We have obligated $75.3 million of that funding to water projects in cooperation with our local water purveyors and/or cities in our county, and then $22.2 million of that.
Really, let's talk
Yes, sir.
about that's $75 million out of 114.
Yes, sir.
So that's approximately 70% of your total.
65%.
An infrastructure project that would be around a while.
Yes, sir.
Wow, interesting choice.
And then $22.2 million of that has spent on items related to mental health, homelessness, healthcare, and victims of crime. These are items that included the expansion of our Child Advocacy Center, that have included the expansion of some private mental health hospitals in our community to allow for beds for both adults and children, and a continued cooperation with Bluebonnet Mental Health in our county to provide direct services from everything to alcohol, drugs, and a pilot program that we began out of our jail in order to divert individuals for less than 24 hours to a holding facility that is not our jail. It's very expensive, as you can imagine, to hold mental health individuals in our jail. And so these were our court's approach. We spent very little funding on positions, and the positions that we created out of our ARPA funds were to directly impact our court backlog and address the backlog in our court system. And I'm happy to report that we've made great headway there, and we will
Define headway.
I believe we have worked through all of the backlog, at least in our criminal courts, as I understand
Right,
it.
so
The
this would be county
pandemic
courts at law,
backlog.
county courts at law.
County courts at law and district courts.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
And district courts too. Okay.
Yes, sir.
All right, so you believe you have no backlog of criminal court cases in Williamson
That
County?
occurred during the pandemic.
That occurred in the past. So how far back in time would this backlog be?
That would have begun in 2020 when everything was shut
And
down.
your period that you end that statement is 2022?
That would, roughly 2022, or maybe early 2023, as we were still trying to get things opened back up.
Go ahead and finish up because I got a couple
Sure.
of questions for you.
So keep in mind, my role in the county, I'm appointed by state district judges, and I'm the watchdog of the county from a financial perspective. So we formed a committee in our county that involved our county treasurer, myself, and 2 county commissioners to ensure that we were following federal requirements and state requirements. We are ensuring that we are following all procurement requirements. And one of the big things that I think needs to be emphasized is we are also required to have an external audit of these funds. And those external audit agencies are mandated by the federal government to look for certain things. All of these programs are being treated as high profile type audits.
Right.
And so they're really digging into how we have managed and spent these funds.
Well, that was going to be my question, Julie. Obviously, when you're dealing with such money, and you missed it earlier, we've obviously had a statewide issue with a fraud problem on what would be, a pretty disappointing potential award that's been pulled back. So, most of us here were actually there questioning a state agency about that. So when you look at the classic waste, fraud, and abuse, what are you doing to lock down on this of yourself, and what are you trying to get out of your external auditors, and what flags are you? Because if you would look at a program, and I'll go back to a 1.0 version here, okay, because that's what attracted my letter, was there was no controls on the expenditure, no way to audit the expenditure, forget the disagreement of whether or not the lottery is capricious and arbitrary, just the fact that the actual award had literally been advertised by county government as no strings attached. Hard to audit, no strings attached. Am I missing something?
We would not have passed such a program in our
I
county.
suspect you would not have. Okay, so that's right. The Center West.
You would not have passed such a program in your county because?
We require that there be program guidelines that we can audit against. So if, for example, when we did the small business assistance programs, they had to provide us their tax returns. They had to show us what their rent and their business expenses were and what their lost revenue was. Individuals who applied for the rental and the utility assistance, they had to show us their utility bills.
So therefore, if there was an audit track,
Right.
then it would be, and if it was a
Right.
public purpose of the county,
If there was a public purpose of the county, yes,
as
sir.
determined by the commissioners,
Right.
then it'd be okay with you as long as there was a auditable track.
And it would also need to comply with Article 3, Section 52, obviously.
Right.
Okay, so do you have an opinion as to whether or not it complies with Article 3?
Everything that Williamson County did
I'm talking about this
complies.
type of. I'm not gonna let you duck it. I'm not gonna let you duck it because you brought it up.
Right.
I'm not-
The programs that we administered
No,
that
no, no,
fell
no, I'm
under
not-
those,
I'm not-
I don't have any familiarity with the program in Harris County, sir.
Okay, so you don't know whether it does or does not.
No, sir.
And the public purpose is determined by the county commissioners in a sense, that's right.
And Article 3, Section 52.
Okay, well, do you think making certain that persons are able to have a participate in universal income program, do you think it has economic, given the fact of what your position
I
is?
believe that
Let me
income
finish my-
programs
Can I
can-
finish my
Sure.
question, please?
Sure, sorry.
Thank you, I appreciate it. Do you believe that by providing that type of support has an economic impact?
Sure it does.
All right, thank you.
And let me just restate because the question, the answer I got. Again, what we're looking at here is a advertised, no strings attached, literally, publicly, no strings attached, lottery giveaway, which I call lottery socialism, because I don't know how to describe any better. 1.9 thousand people get winning out of 82,000 applicants, and it's literally advertised as government as no strings attached. Now, your response was that Williamson County would not have passed such a program. I'm glad to hear it. Now, whether 2.0 or 1.0, whatever, Adam, we'll let the courts decide X, Y, and Z, but the concept of having a no strings attached lottery giveaway, popcorn, $500 a month, with no ability to audit is a very poor public policy. And I thanks for the recognition of the obvious that a major county would not have passed the initial program at least.
Do we know whether or not the program is, that at Harris County passed, had the ability to be audited? Or we're just making that assumption?
No, when you have a no strings attached.
No. Do we know whether or not it can be audited?
You can't audit a no strings attached program.
So we
There's
don't-
nothing to audit against.
Okay, so,
Okay.
so we do.
She can give you the audit standard. I mean,
What I'm saying is, you said there's no strings attached. That may just be a marketing gimmick, as opposed to what they internally made a decision to do, that being Harris County. And I don't know enough about the program to say that there was,
Well,
there was or was not an auditor.
well, how about for today's purposes, we'll assume what they publicly advertised is actually what they meant. So we don't have to get into the legal case.
Well, it's not a legal case, it's just us making statements that we really hadn't really looked at. We hadn't gone under the hood, so to speak, to see exactly what it's actually done.
There's no question, Senator, that every public statement came out was no strings attached.
But we don't know what no strings attached means. And
We can only assume the colloquially American, statements apply, but that's just a guess. Okay,
Or we
so,
could assume that we don't know.
no, I think we know that there's no doubt that it was advertised as a no strings attached, and that was in every public document, every TV station,
I
every.
understand what you're saying.
Right.
But the question is do we know what it means when it says no strings attached? That's what I'm saying.
Okay, well, we can only assume no strings attached means what it says, but that's up for the legal teams on both sides to knock out.
All right.
I have a couple of questions for the witness. And it's very important what you just pointed out. It is for the court case to decide that, which makes me wonder why we're having this hearing, because the remedy here, if it is in violation of the Texas Constitution, is in lawsuit.
Well,
We don't need new legislation. We have the Texas Constitution. And if it does violate that portion of the Texas Constitution, the remedy is already in motion. So I'm intrigued why we're having this hearing on that point. If the point of this hearing is the constitutionality of a program in Harris County, the remedy is already in motion. But I do have a couple of questions.
well,
Sure.
can I just read the charge one more time so you know why we're here?
I have read the charge.
Well, good.
I don't think that's necessary.
Oh, well,
I
okay,
think
well,
we're all aware of the
I'm
charge.
just trying to answer your question on the record, okay? Don't worry, we do this all the time in local government.
What is the record?
The questions I have.
The committee record, whatever.
Thank you so much, Ms. Halley. I greatly respect the role of county auditors. Thank God for county auditors and the way that they have been set up with their independence. So, thank you so much. You had mentioned the Small Business Assistance Program, and coming from the county world, I completely agree with you that certainly the better practice is to have a good oversight program. You had mentioned in the Small Business Assistance Program, it was a first come, first serve. Do you know offhand whether all those who applied were able to achieve an award, all those who were eligible were able to achieve an award, or were some who were eligible turned away because of the size of the program?
In Williamson